They were sisters, both artists, both talented. The path for one led to fame, but for the other, obscurity.
I was visiting with a collector, and I saw this painting across the room, and I thought it was really interesting. It was very strong. This painting of a lighthouse. I was really struck by it, and I wanted to know who it was by. That was the first time I realized that Georgia had a younger sister who painted.
Sun Prairie, Wisconsin, 1889. Ida Ten Eyck O'Keeffe was born 2 years after her sister, Georgia O'Keeffe. There were 5 sisters and 2 brothers in the family.
Georgia always got her way about everything. Ida was much more easygoing. Ida was affable, very sociable sort of individual. Georgia always admired Ida. As she often said, she's the nicest girl I've ever met, that I've ever known. But when she became very serious about becoming a painter, an artist, in earnest, and when she started to exhibit, then that's when the sisters appear to have drifted apart.
The family moved to Virginia, where Ida went to boarding school. She taught art before deciding to become a nurse, and practiced that profession on and off for the rest of her life, which gave her a degree of financial independence. In New York, the influential photographer and art dealer Alfred Stieglitz was about to change Georgia's life forever. Shown some of Georgia's drawings, he wanted to meet her, and eventually convinced her to come to New York, where they lived together and eventually married. They spent summers at Lake George, New York, where Ida often joined them.
When you're at Lake George in the fall of 1924, the magical fall of 1924, when just everything seemed to be kissed by this sort of joie de vivre, and the sisters were mugging in front of the camera, Georgia's laughing, which is very rare to see her really letting go like that in front of the camera. And you can just tell just how much they got along, how much they cared for each other, and found great comfort in one another's company.
Ida caught Stieglitz's eye as well. He was impressed when she bagged a squirrel with one shot, skinned it, and cooked it. However, his interest in her was not entirely platonic.
He had this real fascination for her. He's taking photographs of her, he's sending her all these little notes, is constantly flirting with her.
During the summer of 1925, Ida began the formal study of painting. She made quick progress and was included in a group show at a New York gallery 2 years later. This exposure convinced her to pursue more training, and in 1929 enrolled at Columbia University's Teachers College. There she studied with one of Georgia's former teachers, Charles Martin, who taught her complicated formulas for creating dynamic, abstracted compositions. Every summer, Martin held classes on Cape Cod, and it is there Ida first saw an old lighthouse called the Highland Light.
Ida fell in love with the Highland Light on Cape Cod at North Truro. And she decided to make it the theme of a series, 7 paintings. The first one, a realistic depiction of the lighthouse.
That first painting is now lost, but the others remain vividly with us.
She then launched into 6 experimental compositions in which each became more complex and introduced a new color into each one.
Ida and her younger sister, Catherine, exhibited in galleries and shows in New York. But eventually, Georgia had had enough and demanded that they stop exhibiting. Catherine gave up painting altogether.
Georgia was disgusted with Ida, and she wanted to be the artist, the only O'Keeffe artist. She was the only one who should be exhibiting. However, Ida refused to give up painting.
The launch of Ida's painting career was against the backdrop of the Great Depression, and to survive, she wrote short stories and other materials while she taught art at a succession of schools. The demands of teaching left her little time to spend on developing her own art. Over a 10-year period, she moved 13 times. In 1938, she completed this work, Stargazing in Texas, during a brief tenure at Our Lady of the Lake College in San Antonio. From Texas, she visited her brother and his family in Havana, Cuba, creating memorable work from that trip. Ida never married, and in the early 1940s, she moved to the Southern California town of Whittier, where she spent the last 19 years of her life.
By the time she gets to Whittier, I think she had been pretty much spent. She's now in the twilight of her years, but she finds herself a real community there, and continues to teach art, to exhibit, and to be a member of that community, who was well respected and very well liked. She's an individual who obviously had great talent. If she had received the support and the nurturance and the time to focus on her art, she would have been much more well known. And I think the other thing is, if she had had a Stieglitz who had really promoted her and her art, it would be a very different story that we would be telling today.